This video is made for a general audience. It may also show methods that could be harmful if not used right. Kids should be careful and make sure you use the right safety techniques when working on your own models. Also, Buddy Thunderstruck is made by Stupid Buddy Studios and American Greetings, and I do not claim any ownership of their property. This video will also contain spoilers to the show, so I recommend giving it a watch if you haven't already. Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. It's been a while since I've uploaded, and I'm hopefully going with a new style here, with the little avatar and all. Yeah, I might have traced some things, but anyway. This model is based on someone from an old show that I watched as a kid. And it's not Thomas. Let me tell you about another special show. Buddy Thunderstruck is a show that holds a special place in my heart. It's got awesome design, music, and humor. So, let's talk about it. Now, I wouldn't really be surprised if you never heard of this show. To be honest, I kind of forgot about it for a few years myself. I don't really remember how I found it again, but when I did, I was flooded with nostalgia. If you haven't heard of it, Buddy Thunderstruck was a stop-motion animated show on Netflix that was made in 2017. It was created by Robot Chicken and apparently Care Bears. I'm not joking, they even clarify it in the trailer. It is about the adventures of two friends, Buddy Thunderstruck, truck racer and local celebrity,
hey, anyone seen a winner?
And Darno Feltzervalve, Buddy's mechanic and best friend.
We almost died!
It's about their adventures in a town of Greasepit, basically. Think Dukes of Hazzard and Fast and Furious, but for kids. And with anthropomorphic animals. And despite it getting a 7.7 out of 10 rating on IMDb, it only got one season of 12 episodes and an interactive special. I guess technically 23 episodes, since each episode has two stories with the exception of the last one. I would compare this show to something like Tugs, because like Tugs, they were both good shows with massive potential and were made by recognized creators, with Buddy Thunderstruck made by some of the people that made Robot Chicken, and Tugs being made by the same people who helped Britt Allcroft make Tom's Friends. Rest in peace, Britt. Anyway, in Buddy Thunderstruck, Buddy drives a semi-truck named the Rabble Rouser. Now, I'm gonna say, this might be my favorite vehicle in the show, which I guess might be obvious, but I mean, look at this. The paint scheme, the bumper, the supercharger, the cab, I love it. Now, I've wanted to make my own model of the Rabble Rouser for a while, even when I used to watch the show as a kid. If they made a toy of it, I would have loved to find and order one off of eBay or Amazon or something, but unfortunately there were no toys made for the show. I mean, apart from those Buddy and Darnell plushies, but that wasn't going to stop me from making my own. I had rediscovered an old favorite show and had both the motivation and the inspiration for it, along with my school's 3D printer. But I wasn't going entirely blind. I watched other people explain how they made their customs and or projects, and the problems they encountered.
Caused me to spend an unholy amount of time.
I've certainly experienced my fair share of frustrations.
Models are set up so that if you remove the pickups extension from the main motor, the motor won't work.
But it was way too higher.
Not even! My life is pain!
So I was prepared to encounter some issues of my own, but I wasn't really sure what. Since it's a physical prop in the stop motion show and all, I could easily find a bunch of reference images to use. Clear ones at that. But despite this, none of the images were like the Thomas reference images with the rulers, so that meant I couldn't get the exact measurements on the parts. So all I had to work with were the shots from the show and some behind the scenes images I found online. I also did some research about any info I could find. I'll try and put the links that I remember in the description. What I learned is that there were multiple Rouser models. There was a larger model, which I based my main model on, a smaller 1 in 43 scale model that was used for the race scenes, a key difference being the headlight shapes, and an incomplete close-up model for interior shots. But I also found 2 other models, and yeah.
Oh my goodness!
Anyway, I did have a rough plan for the project. It was to basically 3D print the cab, wheels, and fenders at my school, and use 2 pieces of wood I had lying around, and some colored pencils to make the frame and axles. Though, like many other custom showcases, there would be some issues that I would run into. But that's for later. So in the meantime, I hopped onto Thingiverse to find a good starting point. And I would find a simple semi-truck model made by Drifted Dreams. It was also his first model made on Tinkercad, so congrats. But I would need to change it quite a bit for what I'm making. So, plopping it onto Tinkercad, I got to work. I moved the fuel tank forward and removed the bumper, as I would be making a replacement later. I then started rebuilding the hood and cab, and for the fenders, I modified the ones from a model of an International KR-12 semi-truck from 1946, specifically a 1 in 72 scale model made by Lewis Dioramas. Looking back, I could have made the front fenders taller, but still looks alright and it doesn't bother me too much. I then modified the grille by turning it sideways, where I would later realize I left a gap behind the grille, which would cause problems when I removed the supports later on after printing. I then added the exhaust pipes, the interior, and the seats, which I found on Thingiverse, but I don't remember who made them. Same story with the supercharger blower. I would then start modeling the back wall and its speakers, along with the roof, bumper, headlight rings, and the interior pieces. But while trying to group everything together, I encountered a weird glitch. Whenever I tried to group the 2 fenders to the model, one would group, but the other one just disappeared. Okay, so while recording the footage to show you this glitch, it all of a sudden decided to work now that everything was alone in the design plane. Thanks, TCAD, but too late because I already finished it. But at least I could still show the original model ungrouping, showing at least some part of this glitch. But I worked around it by exporting the cab and fenders separately and combining them on the slicer. I would then print out both the cab and the other parts at school, and after that was finished, work could finally properly start. Now, I never planned any sort of scale, so I just printed it as big as the build plane. That caused it to be so big that the teacher had to change the filament for the main cab piece 3 times. They probably weren't completely full rolls though, but still. Either way, the printing went well, apart from the intended back wall falling over as he changed the filaments, causing it to split into 2 parts, but that's nothing I couldn't salvage. So I brought the printed pieces home and got to work the next day. I started by sanding the model and ripping out the old grille. I also tried on some test wheels I printed. And I'm glad I did because I found out that the original front wheel size was too small, so I swapped it with the original rear wheel size later on. I then finished sanding and then I painted the model black. But by the time I finished most of it, I noticed that there's a lip along the edge of the body, so I used large paper clips to add them on. I would then paint the gas tanks and interior a pavement black. I also painted the booster button orange, and then painted the supercharger's blower silver. And after I re-glued the back wall on, I added what I think is a rear window cover. There's not one visible in the interior shots, but I honestly don't know what else it could be. Now at this point, the truck was looking more like if the vehicles from Fast X and Black Dog had a baby. So it was now time to add the iconic green flames. I used a green Posca paint marker to draw the flames out, but I was originally just going to use the marker to color it all in. But I ultimately decided to just use a green paint called Shamrock, which worked just as good, if not better. Before adding those to the right side, however, I painted the roof and bumper bars black. I then used painter's tape and a white Posca paint marker to add the white racing stripes. And also, a quick word of advice: if you cut it with a box cutter or something, don't mix up the tape you remove. I made this mistake on the hood and had to redo it. Anyway, once that was done, I used a black Posca paint marker to clean it up, and then I did the right side and it ended up being too big, so I went ahead and thinned it out a tad. I then painted the inner seats a lighter pewter gray, I think that's how it's pronounced, and then I used a conveniently sized cardboard circle I found to make the white background for the racing number. I taped it on, traced it, and colored it in with a white Posca marker. And then I used a silver, not Posca paint marker to paint the area around the grille and the exhaust. I then started adding the white lightning bolts to the side. Around this time, summer vacation was basically in pissing distance right now, so I had to hurry so I could print the rest of the parts I needed. I printed the final wheels and fenders, but the fenders had a thing called stringing happen. It's just like how it sounds. The printer formed strings around the model as it printed. I could hold one fender up and it would hold the other. I was pretty much ready to start to really make progress, but before I started work, I printed a smaller, more Trackmaster scale model to go alongside my other Trackmaster models, since my main model was just a little big. And with that, I was done and ready for the project to be in full swing. I started by adding the white bolt to the other side and then added the number 7 to each side. I then painted the inner seats a lighter gray because they were a little dark. I then painted the bumper and hubcaps with the silver paint marker. Then I added the license plate and white bolts to the bumper. I then tried to start on the smaller model, but I had a hard time removing the supports from the wheels. I then added the number background to the back of the cab, and then added the orange lightning bolts on the hood, and the orange writing on the wheels, with an old orange paint pen, not Posca. I then took a break from working on the cab and decided to make some progress on the fenders. I started by freeing them from their stringy prison and then dremeled them out to make them more open because I think I had a hard time grouping them and I had to do the slightest thing again. I then used cardboard to make the rears back flat to match the original model better. It went pretty smoothly, but this would lead to what might be the hardest part yet. Now, this part of the project probably had the most problems. It's frustrating too because I'll say right now that the chassis I wanted to make wasn't even that complicated. I only planned for it to be on wooden frames with colored pencils for the axles. No steering bracket, no fancy moving drivetrain or anything like that. I just wanted a simple chassis that allowed for forwards and backwards movement. But I'll talk about those problems later. Let's just get back to me explaining the process. I started the chassis by gluing the wooden sticks to the bottom, and it was a pretty decent fit, but with the fenders on it, the wheels were a little too low for any axle holes, so I had to add some more wooden pieces to lower the frame. And the axle holes I made on the wheels luckily fit on the end of a pencil. Quite snugly too, considering I don't think I did any measurements. Not to mention I also had a Dremel bit, this perfect size too. But making the axle holes was harder than I thought. Since the fenders were printed while attached to the model, I couldn't really just place the wheel, trace it, and drill a hole in the middle. No, I pretty much had to do the best I could using rough estimates. Not only to put the hole in the right spots, but also to have the other side align with it. So with my Dremel and a prayer, I made it crooked. so I had to fix that. But after I did, the wheel kept rubbing against the fender, so I had to try and sand the inside of them so that didn't happen. And this part took forever. Just sanding and dremeling and sanding some more. I'm telling you, this probably took days, maybe weeks. But one day I said, hey, I'm gonna try and make this part flatter and more even, and overall clean it up. I just need to peel the wood off and...
No, Sentinel!
Oh, come on, what's the worst that could happen? Yeah, I broke it, and I didn't have a spare piece. Great. I would say this led me to taking a break. And I would also say this was one I desperately needed, as I was honestly getting a little burnt out or even bored of the project. The endless sanding of the fender likely played a part, but a notable thing that happened during the break is that I went on a week-long transportation summer camp and went on my first plane ride. I even played a Pacific Drive radio song on the campus's radio.
There's one DJ, Oscar, who wanted to do, I think he started doing it, just train horns show every
once in a lifetime there. And also went camping on all that jazz. And even saw a steamroller and climax at a place called Clark's Trading Post. This break was so long, in fact, summer vacation ended and I was back in school. But during the break, I was thinking about how to fix the chassis, and then had a revelation. Why don't I just make a 3D printed chassis? Most of the parts were 3D printed anyway, so that's what I did. I modeled and printed the thing, but while modeling the axle holes, I noticed something important. The rear wheels are designed differently than to the front. I mean, obviously, they're bigger, but I meant that the wheels and in turn the axles sit at different heights, which allow it to have that raised rear end look. But my original plan was to just have the axle holes at the same level. But with all the weight on the front, that means that the rear wheels wouldn't be touching the ground. So I added that and then got back to work on the actual model. I started out by ripping out the old chassis frame and test fitting the new one. It fit great and looked even better when the whole chassis was glued together. And after testing the front wheels, I added the rest of them, although the middle wheel didn't really quite touch the ground, so I added a piece of cardboard around it. And I also added some rubber bands on the wheels for added grip, just to make sure they could spin. And after giving the fenders another light sanding, I painted the wheels black. Yes, I know they were already black, but that was mainly for the cardboard pieces. I then tried to think of a way to secure the fenders to the chassis, but I couldn't really just glue them on as is. I needed something else to secure them. I first tried adding cardboard brackets, but then I found some wooden pieces in my drawer that worked much better, so I hot glued them into place, and then with the help of sticky tack, I did an overall test fit, and it was looking really good. I would then paint the rear fenders black, which, yeah, I could have done before gluing them on, but it was a little too late when I thought of it. But after one last test fit, there was no doubt in my mind that we were on the home stretch. Now, there was still a lot of stuff to do, but it was mostly just smaller stuff. I got started by adding the black line separating the cab and hood. I know it's a gap, but I didn't want to take a Dremel to it at this point. I then added the horseshoe decals on the back fenders by making stencils with painter's tape, cutting them out, and filling them in with white Posca paint marker. The first attempt didn't work that well, but I tried again the next day and it worked much better. And after adding it to the other side and adding the stars on both of them, I finally hot glued the bumper to the main body. But then I encountered a dilemma on how to add the sponsors to the cab. I could have tried to replicate them with paint pens, but since I didn't have any fine tip Posca paint markers at the time, it wouldn't really look that good, and even if it did, it would be extremely difficult to properly replicate the sponsor stickers in the detail I'm going for with the rest of the model. So I went with the simplest option and just printed them out. My old digital photography teacher even actually offered to print them on sticker paper. Looking back, maybe I could have given it a shot, but I didn't because I don't want to risk dealing with the usual problems of applying stickers. There's a reason why there's a ton of memes about them and Lego sets. So I just printed them on paper, cut each sponsor out individually, and then stuck each of them on with a glue stick. I managed to get the left side pretty accurate, but on the other side I kinda ended up having to compensate with the bottom few. Also, I'm just realizing that I don't see the sponsor sticker for the business Buddy is part of, Thunderstruck Trucking, which I found out was an actual company. Might even still is, I'm not sure. Unless you count this. Maybe it's the logo, I'm not too sure. Anyway, I also cleaned up the hood while I was there. I then decided to work on what was probably the most iconic Rouser ability. The booster.
I got only one thing to say to that. Blame it on the thunder!
What in blazes?
Yeah, if you didn't already know, the Rabble Rouser has a button in the cab that when pressed, the truck hitch becomes a powerful jet engine that boosts the truck forward at incredible speeds.
Whoa, said Thomas.
This was one of the things I wanted to include in one form or the other. I think my old plan for the booster mode was to just put it on the back with sticky tack, but I would not end up doing that. And also, while modeling the booster itself, I noticed that in the show, instead of putting the base against the cab, and then transforming, like I originally thought, but upon a closer rewatch, it instead puts the top of the hitch against the cab, and the booster comes out the bottom, which I guess makes a little sense, but after fixing that in the model I was going to print, it led me to realize that we never actually see the Rouser use the hitch to actually haul a trailer. They definitely have one, and we have seen it on multiple occasions, but it's always just sitting there.
Menacingly!
So that gives the question, can the Rouser even use it, or is the hitch not secure enough to pull one anymore? Anyway, trailer questions aside, I put both hitch modes on their bases, which I'm pretty sure were made with spare poster board pieces from my digital photography class. I then painted them and also added the pistons. Also, fun fact for those who didn't know, rocket power semi-trucks are a real thing that were built. Anyway, I then went through the headlights, only to realize that I lost the rings I printed for them, and also some other interior bits. Anyways, after reprinting those, I got back to work. I cut down the shifter because I realized it was a little too tall. You could even see it from the windshield. After that little sidetrack, I then worked on the headlights. My basic plan was to pour hot glue in a similar shape so that it will slide into the rings. But on my first try, I put it on a piece of cardboard for some reason, and the cardboard peeled onto the lens. So for my other tries, I just poured them onto my workstation. Thank you parents for putting vinyl on my work surface to protect it. Anyway, I did that, put the lens in the rings, and glued them on. I just used normal painter's tape to add the tape over the headlights. Next, I finished painting and adding the interior bits. I then noticed that I forgot the mirrors, which might have been a mistake to do so, because the chassis might have been frustrating at first to get right, but the headlights were an actual, literal pain. For the mirrors, I used old 3D printed tanker wheels with the outer rim cut out and hot glue in the middle. But cutting the outer rim caused the piece to be very small, and my hands are not, which meant multiple times my fingers were either burned or were close to being burned by the hot glue. Not to mention that I wanted to try to replicate the fancy mirror attachment, so that was another pain, Not to mention that I lost one I made for the other side, so I had to go through the process again.
You've used that joke before.
What are you, the joke police?
Until I thought, hold up, what am I doing? And decided to use a simplified version by just using a straight wire, so it was much easier. But after that, I was basically just looking for stuff to do. But apart from the hood latch, I was pretty much done. Alright, forgot about that. I guess I should probably work on the little one, huh? Anyway, after remembering the mini rouser, I glued it together, drilled the axle hole so that only one was needed, and then smoothed out the seam with extra clay I had and painted it black. I then tried to remove the supports on the other wheels.
Fart nugget!
Keyword untried. But I used this as a chance to remodel the wheels to be more sturdy. Now moving back to the big one for a moment, I removed the headrests because the rear rouser doesn't actually have any. I also finally managed to make the hood latch and stuck it on the side. It's far from properly scaled or accurate looking, but at least they're there. I then realized that in this shot in the final episode called Moneybags Changes Everything, shows an almost perfect shot of the rouser's interior. I mean, look at this. It shows so much. I would add the brown and silver strip and then build the armrest. I added the orange lightning bolt because I swear you can barely see a speck of orange in the shot. Anyways, after I finished it, I glued it into place and I think it fills the area nicely. I then added the silver door handles and added the black indents on the exhaust pipes, which were portrayed by black lines made with a paint marker. And man, it really added something. I then worked on fixing the fuel tanks because it had 3 silver rings in the actual model, instead of it being one color. So I cut the cap off, sanded and repainted it, and drew the 3 rings, including the middle ring. Why I didn't just cut a strip of cardboard to make the thing 3D, I'm not sure. I might do that another time. Anyway, at this point I was thinking about how to make the rear windows. I first tried to 3D print it in clear PLA at my school and sand it, but that wouldn't end up working. While I was doing this, however, I put the cab on a paper towel roll and it fell off, breaking an exhaust pipe. But after I fixed that little incident, I added some wood pieces under the roof as sort of bracket and painted them black. Then I worked on the small model a bit more and added some green flames to it. But like father like son, the left side was too large. And back on the big model, I added the rear bumper and painted the blinkers, along with the weathering too, because why not? And then back to the little model again, and I added some more details, except for the sponsors because I did not know how I was going to make those in that small size. And then I added the mud flaps and finally found something to make the rear windows. It was basically an old transparent piece of a folder that I cut and glued. And upon finishing the mud flaps for both models, I am proud to say that my custom Rabble Rouser and Mini Rouser are done. This model might have been one of the longest ongoing projects I've ever worked on. But I'm proud to say, despite all the physical and mental frustrations, it was all worth it. I guess if I had to pick one complaint about it, I guess it would be that the front fenders aren't too accurate to the original, but it's not enough to make them all bad. They still look pretty good. It may not be one of my biggest fascinations like Thomas, but no matter what, Buddy's Thunderstruck is an amazing show. The music is amazing, the art style is iconic, and I think the jokes in it aged great.
Take them all back and get me #1 pencil.
Think, Junior, think!
This show will always hold a special place in my heart, and I'm super glad to finally have not one, but 2 models of the most iconic truck from it. There's a chance I might add or change some things on them, but that's a project for another day. Also, fun fact, while first working on this model, I originally thought it might be pretty big compared to the actual large model. Later on, I started thinking it might be a bit closer than I thought. But then I found 2 images on the Sam Levy, or Sam Levy, however you pronounce it, site that revealed the true size of the large-scale Rouser. In this shot, probably from an episode, it shows the Rouser in front of a house. But this behind-the-scenes shot shows how big the house is compared to a person. And using both the person and the house as a size comparison, the Rouser would be about a little bigger than their forearm. In my model, not quite that big. But in all honesty, I don't mind nor care about this. This model's current scale is one that works for me, and I just thought it was cool to mention. And thanks to my digital photography class, I also got to take some pretty good pictures of it. Also, this video on itself took a while to complete, and rewriting the script when I already started likely didn't help. And my avatar will probably change the next time you see it, because it currently uses 3 to 4 overlay layers on CapCut. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this model as much as I do. And also, let me know in the comments if you think of any way I could improve this model. And I'm also gonna try to post a little more. No schedules or anything, just not a year, hopefully. But I'm not promising anything. Either way, I hope you enjoyed this video. And you guys have a good one. Goodbye.
I'm in no